Tamsin, welcome to Mind Matters podcast, which I'm delighted. 5 years ago we spoke.
I know, crazy.
It's nuts. It's I can't actually get my head around how quick that 5 years has gone, and how much has happened for the both of us. So, obviously, for people watching this, Tamsin is a lady that I had the very great pleasure of being introduced to 5 years ago. More than that, probably about 6 years ago. So Tamsin Astor is the founder and chief habit scientist of Yoga Brain Coaching. She's known for giving her clients the tools to shift their mindset, organize their vision, and improve their habits to create an efficient, productive business. We make 35,000 decisions every day, which leads to decision fatigue. Dr. Astor helps her clients reduce the amount of overwhelming decision-making they do by harnessing their goal-achieving machine, aka their brains. This also increases their time and energy for fun. Love that bit. Tamsin Astor holds a PhD in neuroscience and psychology and a postdoctorate in education. She also has certifications in yoga, mindset, and Ayurveda. She is an executive coach and the author of the book, Force of Habit, Unleash Your Power by Developing Great Habits. So, yes, there we go. Like, nice, bright color, dark font, fabulous.
Nicely placed too.
Absolutely. I know, yes, it's quite right too. Quite bloody right too. And we'll get the link in for that in the bit
the show notes.
That's the one. Yeah, thank you. At least you know what I'm doing. I bloody don't. Right. So tell me, Tamsin, we had a wonderful conversation last time. Rather deep. Very insightful, very informative, and I got a lot of great feedback about that one. So to have you back on is an absolute pleasure. So tell me, what's been happening over the last 5 years?
Well, goodness. So one of the big things that's been happening in the last 5 years, I've done a lot more speaking, which is really fun to get up on stage and be in front of audiences and get people excited about changing their life, changing their business, changing their habits, thinking about their big juicy vision. So that's been really fun. And of course, with COVID, a lot of that was virtual, but it's been really fun to, connect with people in a bigger, broader community way and not just in the one-on-one coaching. So that's been one of the big shifts that I've made in the last 5 years. And then, of course, navigating parenting 3 kids through the pandemic, of course, has been somewhat interesting. My children have all struggled in their own ways with mental health, physical health during the last few years. And that, as a divorced mom has been really tough, figuring out the co-parenting piece, and figuring out how to, make decisions that serve everybody well and be there in the best way that I possibly can for my kids and my clients and my friends. But I haven't been back to the UK in 2.5 years, and that's been really tough. I've never, after 20 years of living in America, had that long a gap of going back to the UK. So I look forward to getting back to London at some point soon.
Whenever, yeah, it's just, who knows what's, we just have to quite literally fly by the seat of our pants on this, don't we?
You know it. Yeah.
Frustrating. And with, as I'm sure you may well have seen, the travel industry in the UK is been rather slow in catching up with the sudden demand and the sudden levels of freedom. So it's kind of
navigating
crashed and burned.
Yeah. Maybe we don't want to use those words with plain sight, Simon. I'm going to just get that out of my head for a moment.
Well, yeah, my wife works at Aberdeen Airport. She's a firefighter there, so yeah, hopefully, she doesn't have a run of busyness. That would be
yes. There we go. Let's put that good vibe out into the world, right?
yeah. Safest form of travel still. So happy days.
Yeah.
So in terms of your work, what have you found the biggest challenges since we last spoke properly over the last 5 years? What's really been the biggest challenge that you've had to figure out?
So, the thing that's been really interesting in terms of the clients I serve in the last few years has been just one of the areas that I've seen a lot of struggle with is boundaries between the different roles that people, take on in their lives, right? And that's been a combination of COVID and working from home, but also in the kind of the hybrid model of working part from home and part from office. It's begun already for many companies with things like Zoom and Google Meet and Teams and all of those, softwares, that a lot of people have, fallen into a situation where they feel like they have to be on call for all their different roles all the time, right? So on call as a boss or an employee or as a team member and as a parent and as a partner and as a son or a daughter. And so what that has essentially done to many people is created such an overwhelming level of stress that they are dealing with huge mental, physical, emotional side effects from that, right? Because what we know from long-term stress buildup is it doesn't serve you, right? And particularly one of the right, and one of the issues we see a lot in the US, where there is much less regulation around vacation time, around maternity leave, is that most Americans don't take their full vacation, which is often as little as 10 days a year. Most Americans check in via email or phone when they're on vacation, so they're not truly getting a break, right? Because there's this sense of fear, right? We know that 55 hours a week is the kind of maximum limit of productivity. When people work more than 55 hours a week, their productivity doesn't increase, it actually drops. But still there's this expectation of, if I'm not showing up and I'm not available and I'm not responding to that email to my boss at 10 o'clock at night, he's going to fire me, right? And so what it's produced is this sense of like, you're sitting there, at your kid's hockey game and you're like checking a message from your boss, and then you're also trying to deal with your 10-year-old who's sitting next to you, and then you're messaging your husband about like defrosting the chicken breast for dinner, and right? And the problem with that is that it becomes a habit, right? It becomes a habit to expect the adrenaline, right? And the bing and the ding and the reaction here and being needed, so there is a sense of addiction and the craving of like busy, 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 and like worshiping at the altar of busy, 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 right? Which often doesn't change until there's a diagnosis, right? Or a relationship ends, or a kid says, you never pay attention to me, right? You have one of those kind of like, oh, moments, right? Where your doctor is like, you've got diabetes, or you've got the beginning of heart disease, or you need to be on statins because of your blood pressure, or, your partner is like, I think this marriage is over because, you're always on your phone and you're not talking to me, or whatever it is, right? And it's often not until we get to a crisis point that people recognize that. So that's one of the big shifts that I've seen with the people I serve, who tend to be highly intelligent, successful career people who get to this point of being like, how do I prioritize? And how am I not living the life that I thought I would be living, and the life that I really love? Like, this feels so exhausting and overwhelming, and I'm not showing up for the people I want to show up for,
Yeah. It's quite bizarre in that respect. With ADHD diagnosis is on the increase, and it's almost like that description is that people are almost, the society and culture, it's almost like it's channeling people into a state of ADHD in order to serve all the needs that they have to serve.
Absolutely. And what we know from the research is that every time you get distracted, it takes 23 minutes to get back into that same level of concentration and focus that you had before. So I know I have an Apple Watch. I love my Apple Watch because it goes, get off your ass, go for a walk. You haven't taken enough steps today. Or it goes, well done, Tamsin, you hit your goal for the day, And so I love that aspect of it. But when I sit and I work or I'm having a conversation, I take it off, because if my wrist is flicking with every text message, every LinkedIn alert, and I can go in and change all those things, and I've got a lot of them disabled, but still, my kids texting me, all of that, I know I'm not going to be as productive, because multitasking doesn't exist. What you're doing is you're quickly switching between the different activities, right?
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of women would want to argue that point, but there we go.
I know. And I'm like 98% of the population can't multitask. So how are you suddenly in that 2%?
Yes, it's a fun point to throw out, isn't it?
Yeah.
uh, the naysayers. Yes, it's so. How have you helped? What is it that you've? I mean, how has this affected you? All this, the impact, because it's not just our clients that struggle with this. We are constantly having to manage this as well ourselves. So how have you managed that for you, and how has that translated into your clients?
So there's a few things that I do personally myself, and I never get my clients to do stuff until I've tried it out. Like that's one of my kind of core
Yeah.
business philosophies, is that I need to be the first subject / victim, you know, of the methodology, right?
Yes.
So a few things. One is to create rituals, habits, routines around the things that you know allow you to be on track and do the things you need to do. So what do I mean by that? I mean recognizing and identifying the practices that you can do every day which allow you to show up. So most of the world, particularly the Western world, starts in a state of reacting to the external world by picking up their phone and checking their email, checking their tweets, checking their text, checking their Facebook messages, where you're then immediately going into reaction. So one of the things that I do, and I tell all my clients to prioritize, is start by looking at the internal world, right? How am I feeling this morning? How did I sleep? What's going on inside me? And what can I do to regulate that, right? So the 3 non-negotiables that I commit to every day, every morning before I go into service mode, before I even feed my dog, you know, feed my cat, wake up my kids, anything else, is I move, I meditate, and I journal.
Yeah.
So I call it the 3 M's. The journaling I call mind dump. I'm like, let me just get it all out of there, right? And
Yeah.
the moving is I just have to, my body's been static for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. So I've got to, you know, integrate all the different parts of myself by moving my body, right? The meditate is I need to prioritize, you know, becoming friendly with my mind, right? And I started studying Tibetan Buddhism and took refuge as a Tibetan Buddhist nearly 9 years ago now. Been meditating for nearly 15 years. And one of the things that I know from a consistent meditation practice is that it teaches me about myself, gives me grace, gives me pause to react, right? So it's all of those mental habits. I'm kinder to myself. I give myself more grace. I listen to myself. I get intuitive downloads more clearly, right? So I prioritize meditation. And I find that if I journal after meditation, what comes out in my journal is fucking brilliant, if you pardon my French, right? Because I've given myself that space
Yes.
to listen to myself, right? So sometimes my journal is full of like, I don't want to be thinking about this anymore. I got to change that. Or it's, this is a brilliant business idea I'm having. I need to put this into action and like reach out to my VA and be like, can you make this happen? I've had this brilliant idea, right?
Yes.
Or this person needs to meet this person because they can help each other in their business this way, right? So doing those practices where you are really focusing on your mental body, your physical body, your energetic body as a starting point of the day before you go into service, before you go into reaction, and the same with the end of the day. So starting and ending your day on your own terms, looking after your mind, looking after your body, looking after your energy, for me is a total non-negotiable in being a healthy human.
I couldn't agree more. I do the same thing in my own way. And everyone I speak to who asks for help, whether a client or a friend or whatever, I tell them the same thing. 100%. It just, it bookends the day, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
In the right way.
Yeah, right.
And routine is so important. Without routine, you know, it's okay to float through life on some occasions, but we need structure and we need routine to give
Right.
that focus and purpose and focus. Oh,
No, and
I
it
do
is.
speak English.
I understand you. It's all good. I'm sure everybody else does too. No, I mean, I think the thing about that too, Simon, that's so key is the kind of recognition that you can take control, right? And so often people come to me as a client or as a friend, or I see when I'm on stage, and I'm sure you have that same experience, where they feel like they've lost control and they feel like everybody else is making the decisions for them. And, you know, I sometimes describe it as being should on, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's explicit,
Yeah.
like, you know, boss requiring things that don't feel exactly right, or society saying, as a white woman of this age, you should look this way, you should like this, you should weigh this much, all that kind of shit that society shoulds on us, right? So,
Yes.
you know, dissociating from that, giving yourself some space from that, and creating the routines that serve you so that you don't have to go into every day with the decision of, what should I eat? Should I exercise? Am I going to meditate? Am I going to meditate before I walk the dog or after I walk the dog? Or am I going to take my kid to school and then I'm going to, right? When you add all those decisions, you get decision fatigue and you end up not doing it, right?
True. Yes. Yeah. 100%. I've I've been watching, so, and it's an ever increasing theme when on what I love watching other people's podcasts and listening to stuff. And when I'm out walking my dog, I will listen to podcasts or on YouTube or whatever. And it's all this stuff is just coming up time after time after time. Yet there are so many people who just no, shut it out for whatever reason's going on, whatever's happening in their life.
Right.
They're not, because you've got to be ready.
Right. And well, and also there's pain, right? I think, and that's something that I experienced last year. Like, all three of my children ended up in hospital last year. And I got to this point where I was in so much psychic pain from all of this that I didn't want to be in my own body. I didn't want to be in my own head. Like, it didn't feel like a place I wanted to be. And for the first time in years, I stopped meditating and journaling because I was like, this doesn't feel like a nice place to be. And that was a huge kind of like slap in the face moment for me, because I saw the impact it was having on my life and the life of those around me. Because I get much more reactive when I don't meditate. I make shitty choices about what I eat, about how I treat my body when I'm not meditating and journaling and prioritizing that kind of, you know, deep, you know, inner self care, right. And it, you know, and I'd never had such a deep, you know, reaction to that before, because, you know, as we talked in our last podcast 5 years ago, you know, one of my children's a cancer survivor, so I've been through the ringer of watching my children suffer before. But it was when all three of them were all suffering and there that I just, like, I felt like my heart was caving in, you know. And that was just gave me a different sort of perspective on thinking about something that I thought was like a habit that was never going to die in my life, you know. And for the first time, I let go of those habits because I was like, nope, I don't want to be here.
Yes, and that's, you know, it's as we know, and many people watching this will know, that it's a natural self-protective mechanism, isn't it? Because there comes a point where there's only so much awareness of the shit that's going on that we can tolerate, and we need that distance to just to exist, let alone function.
Right, the dissociation. And I remember having this conversation with my therapist of me going, this feels unhealthy to me to dissociate. And he said, you know, fundamentally, yes, you want to be an integrated human, but sometimes when we're in so much pain, dissociation is a necessary moment, a necessary step, so that you can keep functioning until you're ready to heal and reintegrate.
Everything has its place, isn't it? And when having worked, particularly reflecting on working with veterans, but also some rape victims, that mindfulness is great at the right time, but having that heightened awareness of exactly how you feel and why you feel the way you do, you've got to be at the right point to have that awareness and be immersed in it, and have done some work first before you can do that. It's that self-fulfilling prophecy otherwise, isn't it?
Right. And I think also for me, it was an interesting process of like the time heals all wounds sort of, you know, that we grow up hearing, you know, and that for me, you know, the big traumatic event was in April last year, and it's, you know, it's coming up for a year. And it wasn't really until I was about 8 or 9 months into it that I could talk about this event in a way that felt that I didn't completely collapse and I could have some emotional distance from, you know?
Yes, it's, well, knowing events, it's hard, that's a lot of pain to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of pain to deal with. So it's really, I know from, not to that extent, not with family, but with friends, what that's like. And it's tough.
Yeah.
It is tough. And you know, fortunately you are in a wonderful position to have that education and experience and life experience and work experience to kind of go, okay, right, I know what's going on, I can deal with this.
Yeah.
And this is where, how many of your clients, when they come to you initially, are lacking self-compassion?
Oh God, it's so common. It's sort of, you know, and it's the, you know, the thing that I point out so often to my clients. And I was having this conversation this morning with one of my clients about how, like, yes, you know, your brain is designed from an evolutionary perspective to point out where you're going wrong, where you're failing, how you're doing things not right, how you're, you know, not completing the things, and that because you're trying to, you know, your brain is designed to, like, you know, scan the savannah and look for the, you know, the saber-toothed tiger and the woolly mammoth and the you know, the Neanderthal with the spear, right? We have to pause and remember that there's that deep historical evolutionary programming, and we have to go, hang on, like, where have I succeeded? What have I done well? Where can I be gentle with myself and be like, yes? And literally, I've got one client who I'm like, stop, pat yourself on the back. Like, just pause for a minute and stop this list of how you failed, all the things that you've struggled with, all the things that you've done wrong, all the places that you haven't lived up to your expectations, right?
Yes.
Brag, pat yourself on the back, right? And also,
Yeah.
like, that really cool new research is coming out that when you brag, it increases the nitrous oxide, and so your blood vessels open up, your arteries open up, right?
Yeah.
The blood flows more, and then you just feel better too, right? So brag, it makes your systems work better.
Yes, it does. 100%. It does.
Yeah.
It floods you with all sorts of good hormones. It's just, it's quite literally a joy.
Yeah. You know what? And on that note, during the pandemic, I love tattoos. I have, I don't know, 13 or 14. And during the pandemic, I got, when the tattoo parlors opened up again, I got tattooed on my right thigh, outrageous joy. So every morning when I sit down to pee, the first thing I see is, and it's written facing me, is outrageous joy. And I
Brilliant.
think, okay, like, what can I do today to bring myself and the people I love and the people around me and I impact outrageous joy, right? Like, because
Nice.
it's a choice, right?
Yes.
Sometimes, you know, sometimes it can feel easier to just contract and withdraw and just, blah, right? I don't want to deal with the world and life and everything. So that's my daily reminder. I look at my thigh, outrageous joy.
Well, you never leave home without it, do you?
Right. Absolutely. It's always going to be there. And if I wear shorts in the summer, everybody else can be like, what does that say? It's upside down. It's because it's written for me. It's not for anybody else, you know?
Yes. Perfect. That's really cool. I like that. Right. So where were we?
I can't remember what the last part of our conversation was, Simon. You were asking about, I was saying about my clients, the shifts. Oh, and my dissociation, I think, was the last thing.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. And my therapist had said it's okay to dissociate, and that you'd said yes with rape victims, and yeah.
I'm so glad you paid attention.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Honestly. One of these days I'll learn. Never mind. Yeah, the self-compassion piece as well.
Yeah.
Yes. And there was something else I was going to ask about there as well. yeah, was actually, yeah, you obviously, the self-compassion piece with your clients, and how do you find that piece with yourself?
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting that. So yeah. So this client I have who I'm like get him to like pat himself on the back, you know. Um, I it's a practice, right? It's a practice
Yeah.
to learn to have grace with yourself. And I think often we are our own worst taskmasters, you know. Sometimes, I mean, I'm not denying, sometimes, you know, we grow up in homes where we have a parent or a sibling, or we have a boss, or a, you know, major relationship that, you know, creates that dynamic or cultivates that dynamic. But often I find, particularly with my clients who are very successful and driven, you know, my like the lawyers and the doctors and the architects who have that kind of, you know, there's a part of their business that I suppose is sort of entrepreneurial, right? And that they're creating all of
Yes.
these deep, intensive relationships with people, and they're kind of figuring out where they want their business to go or what area to grow in, right? And, you know, to be successful requires commitment and work and drive and comfort with failure and that sort of that push, that hustle energy, right? Which has its place and, you know, can create massive shifts and growths and bursts of success in our lives and business, right? However, you know, when we get into that, like we were talking about with the addiction quality of, you know,
Yes.
being needed everywhere and responding to all of the dings and the beeps and the rolls and the, you know, the people, and the requests, is that when we get into that energy of like always striving, we never, well, we don't allow ourselves the space to go, this is what I've achieved. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
Like, ta-da, you know, this is the things that I've committed to and followed through on. And the way that I sometimes talk about it with my clients, which has been the way that I've kind of understood it in myself, is that to be the most successful version of myself is I have to cultivate a deep self-trust. And the way that I cultivate that self-trust is to have commitments that I follow through on, and goals that I set for myself, and habits that will help me attain those goals. But that when I achieve them, I celebrate. And sometimes the thing that you have to focus on achieving is the doing of the actions rather than the result. And often we can get very, very hung up in the, I'm going to lose the 10 pounds by, I'm going to make 10K by, I'm going to whatever it is, right? And it's really good to have those kind of concrete things because they help pull us forward, right? They create all the, you know, the neurological energy around manifestation and the coincidences and the people and the aligned action and all of that. But sometimes we take all these actions and we don't get the results. And that's sometimes where people can then fall apart and go like, why, what's the point? It doesn't matter. When I change my diet, I don't lose the weight, you know, and sink into that kind of like, what's the frickin' point energy, right? And when you step back and go, but I took the action. I took the action, and that's what I'm going to celebrate. I took the action. You know, I stood on the scales. I didn't have the second glass of wine. I made the 10 calls to potential clients. Whatever your thing is, right? I took the action, and I'm going to celebrate that because that in and of itself is a win.
Yes. Yes. And it's the cumulative effect of those steps,
Right. Right.
rather than big wins are nice when you get them, but don't happen very often, do they?
Exactly.
More
Exactly.
often get a big slap in the face, but that's
Right. And if you let those be the driver of your success and the marker of your success, you're going to find it harder to keep going. And as you and I know, in the world of entrepreneurship, you have to get comfortable failing, and you have to get comfortable failing a lot. And the more you fail and the more you fail forward, the more you'll keep growing and succeeding and doing well. But if you sit there going, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I haven't got this all in that action. Oh, this is not quite right. The script isn't quite right. The words aren't quite right. I haven't got the lighting quite right. I still need to lose 5 pounds. My haircut's not quite right. I haven't, the website doesn't look quite, you know, all of the self-talky things that we do to stop ourselves from launching the program, launching the course, reaching out to the clients, you know, whatever it is, right?
Yep. Yes. And I'll give you some funny example of that. I self-published a book last year.
Oh, well done. Congrats.
Trying to get a publishing deals, you know, it's so hard, isn't it? It's
Well,
really
and
vague.
even when you do, I had a publishing deal for this book. Even when you do have a publishing deal, you have to still buy the books.
Yeah.
You still have to market them. You still have to do the like even, you know, unless you're like Oprah Winfrey, you know,
Yes.
you still have to do all of the grunt work, but you
Yeah.
get paid less because they're taking a bigger cut.
I had, yeah, well, yes, there is that. That was, it's I
Yeah.
had some very, very kind people who, because I had no professional proofreading or anything like that going on. So I had some very kind people buy the book and then inform me of all the errors in the book. Yeah. I wonder what you look for in your life.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. And it's
But
where
it's
you're
helped,
looking
you
for
know,
something wrong. Yeah.
you know, I just, thanks very much. I'll work on that in my own good time. Because if I was worried about spelling mistakes, I'd never get anything done.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I failing forwards is absolutely it.
Mm-hmm.
I often use the analogy of my life is littered with a long line of heroic fuck ups.
Yeah, right. Totally. And I think, you know, the thing that, you know, when you look at that research on like the regrets of the dying and all of that kind of stuff,
Yes.
mostly we regret, you know, what we didn't do rather than what we did, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I saw something on that there's a series on Netflix about near death experiences, which was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and there were not one single person in any of those episodes mentioned anything about regretting things they did.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. You have to take action because
yeah,
you can't create anything. You can't do anything spectacular in the world if you won't take action.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all fluff and veneer, isn't it? It's all
Right. Totally. Totally.
So yeah, makes no difference. So in terms of that's kind of work challenges, just kind of how have you navigated the last couple of years? Because obviously with all the pandemic nonsense and other life events, and I know you've touched on that. You know, your son had cancer, and successfully came out the other side of that, smiling and probably just this magical wizard of a boy.
Yes.
Which is, yeah, I was so buzzing after our last conversation about that. It was really cool. So what's having been through that, and obviously divorce and all that stuff that teaches us all sorts of all manner of wonders. What?
Can you hear my dog wailing in the background?
Yeah, I can.
Now it's my dog's turn.
Yes, yeah, your dog's whining, mine's gonna be snoring.
Yeah, there you go.
So how has that sort of stuff helped you navigate the last couple of years and last year in particular for you?
Sure.
And how has that how again has that kind of shaped things again for you to move on?
So I think, you know, the interesting thing about going through that kind of trauma and the trauma that I went through last year is that it teaches you a couple of things. One, which I think is so important, particularly in America, which is such a kind of independence focused country, is ask for help. Ask for help. Right. And I struggle with that anyway. I'm naturally incredibly independent and I don't like being told what to do. And I'm like, I just gonna like, why would I ask somebody else to do it when I can just go and do it? You know, I'm just like, I'm like, I live my life in action, right? So that has been a huge part of the whole process of going through these different traumas in my life. You know, in 2018, I herniated a disc and I couldn't walk. You know, in 17, I was stalked and hacked and I had to like hide offline for 3 months. You know, so I've gone through these events where when you try and do it all by my own, you know, which is my mom said I used to say that as a toddler, you know, by my own, like, don't you tie my shoes for me, I'm gonna do it by my own. You know, so it's clearly like a lifelong kind of part of who I am, you know. But yeah, asking for help, calling in the support, right, is so key. And we forget that sometimes, that, until relatively recently, we lived down the road from our mother, our grandmother, our cousin, our sister, and we lived in that sort of extended, community. So support, ask for the support, call in the support. It doesn't make you weak, right? It doesn't make you a failure, right? It makes you human, right? And a lot of people love to help. So that would be one thing that I've really, had to kind of, really lean into and get comfortable doing, so that I could survive,
Yeah.
having people show up with meals for me, right? Having people come over and say, let me walk your dog so that you can, go to the hospital and handle this, right? Calling people that I wouldn't necessarily call. So, when one of my children ended up in the hospital and I'd been there for 12 hours with my ex-husband, I called my ex-husband's girlfriend and said, can you go and let my dog out? Normally I wouldn't have said, hey, could you go over to my house?
Yeah.
Right? But, that's the sort of thing that I had to get comfortable doing, right? The other thing I think is so key, and that sort of fits under the umbrella of asking for help, is recruiting the support that you need to heal, right? So whether it's a therapist, whether it's group therapy, whether it's a coach, whether it's, all of the modalities of treatment and healing that we now have access to, tapping, acupuncture, EMDR, classic Jungian analysis, take your pick, CBT, DBT, all of the different things, right? Leaning into and finding support. And again, recognizing that you're not broken, that you're not a failure, that you're not, subhuman, that there's something wrong with you for saying, I've reached the end of my ability to cope with this on my own. I need help. And that's okay. So that's another piece that I think is so important in that. And it's been really important for me and my children. And also I say that to my clients sometimes. I'll say, like, I've got to a point with you on this issue where I don't have the skills anymore. I think you should reach out to somebody who is particularly trained in this area, who can support you in processing this past trauma, for example, right? So being comfortable with knowing your limits and being okay with saying, I need help, whether it's friends or whether it's paid for professional help, is so, so key. And then I think the other piece that has been really key to me for healing and for my clients around this issue too, is really, we think and talk so much about developing our bodies, right? Going to the gym, is it keto? Is it plant-based? Is it vegan? Is it carb this? Is it green smoothies? Is it whatever the hell it is, right? Am I doing the Botox? Am I doing the cryogenic? Am I plunging in the lake? Am I doing infrared sauna therapy to heal my joints, or whatever it is, right? And all of those things are great. I'm not anti them, but we have to also say, how am I healing my mind? And it's not just the therapy piece, but like the daily self work we need to do, right? You don't get a six pack by sitting on the sofa and eating donuts, right? You get a six pack by doing sit-ups, doing squats, doing the work, right? Changing the diet, going to the gym, right? Same with your mind. You have to meditate every day. You have to journal every day. You have to catch your negative self-thoughts. You have to be willing to reprogram those self-thoughts. You have to be willing to do that internal work, right? Which is not swallowing a pill. Some cases people swallow pills. I'm not anti swallowing pills, but the point is that kind of work needs to be done on your own terms and needs to be a daily committed practice. So those, I think, for me, are like some of the huge parts of leaning into your, support and cultivating, healing long term.
Yes. That's beautifully put. There's so many patients or clients, however people want to classify themselves, that both of us have helped them, seem to think, certainly initially, that therapy, for lack of a better expression, is something that's done to them. They don't participate. They turn up, they get theraped, and then they go home.
Right.
But that's not the case. There is they need to go and put this stuff into practice. Practice the techniques themselves. Go and explore it in other areas of life. Spread it. Share the love around their entire life so that they make it as applicable as possible.
Totally. And it's
really hard.
Right. And it's finding the people who'll do that. And I think that's another part of it too. Like, I've had a variety of different therapists over the years, and my father is a Jungian psychoanalyst. So, that was the sort of model that I grew up with as like the most helpful, useful model. But, what was interesting to me is that the therapist that I have, he's trained in a lot of energy modalities as well.
Yep.
And what has worked for me is we'll be talking, and he'll look at me and go, "You're dissociated. Put your feet on the ground. Stop right now, Tamsin. Put your feet on the ground and breathe." And he can see when I'm like spinning into like blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you need to integrate again, And that for me has been hugely healing, that being challenged and noticed when I'm starting to like blah, 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 and like leave my body and kind of, spiral. And he's like, and he catches me. And that, in traditional therapy settings, I haven't had anybody ever look at me in that way, read my energy in that way, and be willing to point, or if they haven't been willing to point it out, because that's not part of the formal therapeutic relationship, to be like, "Stop talking, look at me now." And it's really, and he said that to me when as we started working together. He's like, "Are you comfortable with me doing this? Because I think this is what's going to help heal you and support you."
Yes. People need challenge, because
Yeah.
their whole belief set and these limiting decisions that they make facilitate all their behaviors, and their language and their thought processes, and it needs to be given a bit of a metaphorical slap.
Totally.
Otherwise they just sit and fester in their own bullshit for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I tell people up front, there are times I'm going to tell you things and say things to you that you're not going to like, because they're true.
You're going to be like,
but we'll work through it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Challenging is good.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's the kind of edge where the growth happens. Right. And that's one of the things that I say to my clients too. And when I ask for referrals, is I say, I want clients who are comfortable with me challenging them. I need you to feel comfortable and safe enough with me that I can push you and go, is that really what's going on? Let's lift the hood and look a little bit deeper inside there, because you're not going to change your behaviors. You're not going to change your thought patterns. You're not going to change the way you show up in your results if you keep doing the same damn thing and you're not willing to look at, why am I doing this? Or what might be triggering me to do this action or not do this action?
Yes. Yeah. It's and it's like you've got to be in the right headspace. It's got to be the right time for you to have that level of acceptance to go, right, okay. And that can take some time.
Yeah, totally.
But, and it's that happens throughout each stage, doesn't it? You've got to have acceptance at each stage in order to move on to be willing to do the work to get to the next stage.
Right. And I think there's an interesting piece too, and I'm having that right now with somebody in my life of, I've put down a foot and a boundary around something, and I'm not sure that they're going to do the work. So then the question is whether or not I, change the status of the relationship because of this, right?
Yeah.
Because I have very strong feelings about this, and because it ties in with my value structure. Right. And I think part of that too, and that ties back to what I was saying earlier about self-trust, when we get clarity around what are the things that are important to us, sometimes we are willing to then, if we want to evolve and grow, put ourselves in a situation, with a therapist, with a coach who will go, now you said this was important to you and that you were not going to do this anymore or say this anymore or do that thing. And you just tell me more about why you just broke that trust, that commitment to yourself, right?
Yes. And that's, do you get your clients to sign some sort of agreement to commit fully to themselves?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go. Right. Hey, you bloody signed this.
Show up.
Do it.
Show up for yourself, and I will show up for you too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have that backup.
Yeah. And part of that is being comfortable with the challenge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like entrepreneurship has been my biggest like self-development course ever.
Oh my God, yeah, it's quite phenomenal. Um, the ability to compartmentalize things, uh, and to kind of not the multi, but to be able to kind of pour focus into one thing for a certain length of time, and then step out and go, right, now I've done that, what do I need to do now? And
Absolutely.
try and it's constant. I mean, life is a constant juggling act, but yeah, this
But
is,
it's also, it's that reflection on like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did they not, did that not come across clearly? Like, this is what I meant to say. Why did they take it this way? You know, and I find it too. I've
yes,
been teaching yoga for about 15 years, and I'll say something about a relationship between a joint, you know, and another joint. And like half the room will do one thing and the other half will do something else. And I'll think, well, huh. Like, you know, I thought it
yeah,
was really freaking clear when I said lift your pubic bone towards your rib cage and like roll your tricep this way, you know, and half the room is not getting it. So then I'm thinking, okay, I need to find another way of communicating that, right? And I feel like entrepreneurship has that whole of like, did that make sense? Okay, why is that not happening? What do I need
yeah,
to do here? Oh, I need to be really, okay, let go of my ego. This is not about me. It's about
yeah. It's a challenge. It's a
yeah.
real challenge.
But it's fabulous. I
It
love
is.
it because we grow and learn, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it does. You have to rein this thing all the more, because you don't have that safety bubble
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
employment.
Right. 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 And again, like for me, I have, you know, my 10 reasons why that I read every morning. Why do I do this business? Why do I care about it? And my ultimate big goal is freedom. Freedom for me and the people I serve, right?
Yeah,
Freedom is my big driver, is that I want people to have lives where they feel they have freedom of choice, freedom over their bodies, freedom over the way they make money, freedom over the relationships they have,
yeah,
freedom to have fun,
yeah.
freedom for outrageous joy.
Yes, because life's too fucking short not to.
Don't you know it? Preach.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So tell me, what are you working on at the moment, and what's the next thing for you?
So the next big step is to get on stages a lot more because I want to spread my message more. I want to have more impact. I desire to have more impact. I am really excited about sharing my message with more people, which is really that you can create the life that you desire and that you love by doing three key things. Articulating the life you'd like, so starting to lay the neural pathways, think about it, talk about it, pull
Yeah,
in the people who will support you, doing the daily habits that are going to get you there and being comfortable changing those, working on those, playing the kind of iterative cycle of like, when I do that, that is getting me to my big vision.
yeah,
And then that daily mindset work. How am I talking to myself? What am I letting people do? Why am I being clear about my boundaries? What kind of boundaries are important for me right now? Right. So those having that trifecta to keep you on track, like I call it the microscope is the daily habits, and the future bit is the telescope, and the mindset's going to keep you back and forth between those two.
yes,
So I want to get on some more stages and be like, hello people, let me tell you that this is the way you can create a life that you love and brings you joy and passion and gives you space for all the things.
yeah,
I am doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, which I love, that intimate deep container, and I've shifted the way I'm doing that this year 22, where it's much more high touch. It's weekly rather than bi-monthly. They get Voxer access so they can check in with me. They have their own little Google Dropbox or Google Drive, depending on the client and their safety needs, you know, where all of our session notes and growth work and meditations and all that are dropped. So they feel like they're really
okay,
contained within that relationship, which I love. And I'm seeing much bigger, you know, transformations in my clients, which I used to have more of a like, here's the work, do it, I'll speak to you in 2 weeks.
yeah,
And I realized that people were not always doing it, even if they were really committed to it, because they needed to be, hey, I'm here, I'm listening. How'd it go? Did you follow through on that? What worked? Did it, you know, and it's that process of, you know, that sort of iterative process. Like, how are you following along? Did you fill out your goal sheet? That is really helping transform people's lives. So
yeah.
I'm really excited about that.
Good. That sounds like fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, because it's being really intimate. And that's what I love, is like that deep container, where somebody really trusts me and opens up and really shares, like, what they're struggling with, and that we can co-create. One of my clients who I worked with a bit last year, and then he had some personal things going on, and we started working again under this new model this year. And one of the things he said to me, which blew my mind, was, I never really realized that I could create a life I loved. I've just been following the prescription.
Yeah.
And he teared up, and it was just this real moment of like, wow, you can. It is in your power to do that, and it's so joyful when you step back and go, oh, I can create my life my way.
Yes. And it's a privilege for people to trust you like that, isn't it?
It really is. Oh, yeah.
It's a great thing when you see them kind of transform themselves.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, pearls of wisdom. Let's keep it more, if we keep it to the last couple of years, what do you think are the biggest takeaways you've had that have impacted your life really positively? And how have they impacted your life positively, in terms of you kind of charging forward in life, and how are you going to transmit that to other people?
So one of the things that has been really interesting to me is that I have always been very passionate about what's going on in the world. Moving to America in my mid-20s made me an activist in a different way, because I'd grown up in very kind of open-minded central London with parents who had mixed race friends and gay couples. And, I never really thought about abortion rights and all of that kind of crap living in London, because I lived in a privileged world with overeducated people where everybody was welcome, right? And all ideas were welcome. Moving to the Midwest in my mid-20s, where access to abortion, the trans kids, queer kids, one of my children is in the LGBTQ community, are treated, the regulations and rules around all of that has made me an activist. So one of the things, though, was that I found was that when I would stand up for that, is that I would feel so emotionally drained and exhausted.
Okay.
And so I created for myself a rubric that allowed me to take my activism out into the world, but that didn't energetically drain me. So I created a value structure of, this is what I believe, this is what's important to me, right? Black Lives Matter, all of the things that are important to me, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, animal rights, etc. And decided, with this written, clear value structure statement, I would put that into action in terms of the money I would donate every month. So I'm putting money into these organizations that I value and that follow through on these freedom goals that are important to me. And that I would be willing to, argue with people on social media up to a point. So I made a very clear rubric after having some very sort of difficult conversations with people, particularly during the Trump era and that election cycle, going, I'm going to give it 3 shots. I'm going to have 3 arguments, and then I'm going to end the conversation. And if it gets aggressive, I'm going to block the person, right? So I came up with a very specific rubric that allowed me to do that. So I know that's quite a long answer, but the point of that is getting clear on what's important to you, getting clear on your values, on your beliefs, on, your, whatever you want to call it, your personal motto, your personal statement, right? Getting clear on what is important to you, and then thinking about how you can put that out into the world, which allows you to live through that, but doesn't energetically exhaust and drain you. Because one of the things I've seen a lot of during the pandemic is burnout. And that is not a way to live, right?
No.
So that following through a sort of step process, I think, is really key.
Okay. And that's going to be a very personal method, isn't it?
Right.
People are going to have to figure out their own, based on their values,
right,
etc. So yeah, that's nice. I like that, setting very clear boundaries.
Right. And boundaries again ties back into, a sort of, I guess, a theme of this conversation, which is self-trust, right?
Yes.
And, if you make these commitments to yourself and the people around you, following through cultivates and strengthens that self-trust, which to me is so important. And the more I do that, the happier I am and the more aligned I am.
Yeah. Essential to achieve in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grab it with both hands when you can, because
Absolutely.
it's hard to hold on to.
Yeah.
It takes work, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's another thing too, is that, it's simple, but it's not easy, right?
Yes. Commitment, consistency, as you said, show up, do the work,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
make it happen.
Yeah.
There's a nice that old expression, fake it till you make it, and then there was a kind of a reframe of that, was it fake it till you become it,
Yeah. Right. Right.
which I really liked.
Right, because it's about laying those neural pathways down. It's about behaving as the person you want to become, right? So, I've been reading this book called We Should All Be Millionaires, which is all about kind of, smashing the patriarchy and women, and particularly women of color, stepping into earning more money and being comfortable with that and creating the structures to support. And one of the things she talks about is, broke ass decisions versus $1 million decisions.
Yeah.
What frame are you using to make that decision, right? My
Yes.
life would be easier if I had a cleaner. Oh, I'm not making enough money to hire a cleaner, so I'm not going to hire a cleaner. I'm going to keep vacuuming and cleaning the toilet at 2 a.m, even though that means that I can't show off my job.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, that's superb. So your book,
Yes.
where will people find this, or where can they?
On Amazon Co UK or Amazon.com, depending where you are in the world.
Okay,
Force of habit, unleash your power by developing great habits.
excellent. Okay, well, I will put the link. I'll get the link, and I'll put it in to make life easy for people.
Great.
So yes, listen, Tamsin, thank you. It's been a delight to catch up after 5 years.
That's
It
wonderful.
feels like about 5 weeks.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I will also give you, I hope that's okay, the link to my Facebook group, because what I've been doing there is doing weekly tea with Tamsins, where I drop some little pearls of wisdom. But I'm also you'll find all of my content in there. So if you like what I've talked about, you can find podcasts. You're my first podcast from 5 years ago. YouTube videos, Facebook lives, blog posts, so that you can, if something sparks your interest, you can find more information there, and that's more live and updated than my book.
Fantastic. Okay, no, that's really cool. I'll make sure everything is in the show notes for this. And yeah, and if you well, I know people will have thoroughly enjoyed this, hearing what you have to say and hearing about your life and your work. Then yeah, get in touch.
Please do.
Because I know for a fact Tamsin is a fantastic coach and does great work. So yeah, please do get in touch with her. Tamsin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We'll I know we'll catch up again at some point, no doubt.
Fabulous.
All right, thanks, Tamsin.